this is probably a good time to get into it because, specifically when I was writing up my laundry list of government complaints, I was thinking about the condo market specifically because I read an article that says over 2,000 new condo units in Vancouver sit empty, with projections as high as 3,500 by the end of the year, which got me thinking, well, if you own one of these things, what's the vacant property tax going to cost you, right? And so that's 3% of the current value of the property. So if that's a $500,000 condo that's been sitting, you owe the government $15,000. Who the hell wants to get into a situation where they're buying an investment property with vacancies are high and with this property tax, empty property tax looming over your head? You're going to take a loss on the rent and then you're going to pay the government $15,000. Thank you very much, government. So I think that the vacant property tax was a knee-jerk reaction, stupid policy. I think that needs to go immediately to give some people relief and bring some confidence back to the single bedroom or bachelor condo units. Because those will move again. Another piece of policy.
I disagree. I disagree that I think you're out to lunch on that. I think, first of all, that's not a government of Canada policy. That's a municipal government. That's City of Toronto, the City of Vancouver. That's putting those vacant tax rules in. Second of all, those taxes exist to encourage the use of housing, not just ownership and renting it out. Especially in Vancouver, we're seeing family-sized homes and condos sitting empty because they've been treated just as investments. Especially foreign buyers were buying these up and just holding them because the Canadian housing market was increasing so rapidly. So it's been treating as a stock portfolio rather than just shelter. Now, if a developer can't sell due to it being priced too high or it not being value, the solution isn't tax relief, it's lowering the price. If you want to sell more, you lower the price of those units and it will sell. Somebody will buy it, but just not at the price point that it's at. Nobody wants to live in a $750,000 hotel unit in the sky.
Well, the thing is, they did. And these units weren't empty and they were selling. But again, another piece of government policy is and this one, there's two ways
to look. What about that is government policy? The builders were building
to look at this.
Profitable one unit. It was all about profit for builders. It was nothing to do with government, unless you wanted the government to mandate a policy that they have to build a certain number of units. But that's getting more government involvement. That's not less that with your.
Well, that's a little more regulation. I don't know. Have you
regulation over policy? Can you give me the breakdown there?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, government should be regulators. That's about it. Get your opinion in there. Hey, this is how we're going to build our communities out. Not just throw a tax on something and to make a public headline because all these units are sitting empty because of greedy investors, right? Which, look, I get it. There's two ways of looking at this. There's looking at, is the policy a good policy? Yes or no? And then what effect does this policy have, whether it's good or bad, right? So at the beginning, you might say, oh yeah, it's good policy because we have problems with not enough housing for people. So this will encourage more housing, right? So you can make your argument that that's a good policy. But then when you look at when situations change, which is exactly what's happened, and some of that is based on more government policy. We had issues with our universities and colleges turning into immigration factories. And it's like, oh, we need to slow down immigration. But again, when you combine all these policies on top of each other, whether they may be good or good at the time or in good faith, and then the circumstances change, they have an effect on what's going to happen in the future. Now that we've seen a slowdown, and we've seen a slowdown in the immigration, and if you're in another country and you're thinking about coming to school here, the headlines don't look good. And so that's going to influence, maybe we should go to America, or maybe we should go somewhere else. So we had all these units were relatively full. This wasn't a huge problem. Now that we've the government has pulled, or municipal, federal, provincial governments have pulled all these levers, and there's still more to talk about than just these two. It's created a
I think it's a
problem.
bit revisionist history, though. I think like, oh, we built all these units because we had all this immigration happen. Like buying investment properties as a retirement vehicle or as a wealth building tool was around long before we had an immigration problem. This has been a decades long trend of people buying properties, buying these single unit houses or condos and renting them out. The immigration happened later. It was like, oh great, we've now got a place to rent all these, and that poured fuel on that fire. But that was very short lived. Like that was like 2 years of immigration coming in, whereas like the government getting out of building housing, the government not mandating certain number of family units, and it all of a sudden being a portfolio, an investment portfolio. That's where we went off the rails.
I mean, I don't have a huge problem with real estate being an investment portfolio to an extent. I don't know if you know who Charlie Kirk is. He's one of these he's one of these like screw loose, wacky, not extremists, but he goes around. He's a U.S. guy, goes around to colleges and debates with children to make himself look smart or whatever. I don't know. It shows up on the Instagram feed sometimes. Sometimes it's entertaining. Most of the time it's not. He's a provocateur. But he did have one interesting statement that I would agree with, and in terms of where government should or shouldn't get involved. And they're talking about BlackRock in the United States buying up single family properties en masse, and then renting them back to the people. And he's like, that's where a government should intervene and say, yeah, if you've got an investment portfolio over $100 billion, you can't occupy this space. You can't buy housing. This is not what it's designed for. It's not designed to be a multi-million or multi-billion dollar stock portfolio for somebody. So that's, I thought it was relevant. I thought that, we don't have that problem in Canada, but that's something that the US should get.
Allegedly we do. That was, we had a similar report come out where all these institutions are buying up these single family homes and condo units and then renting them back and maxing out the rental price. But to me, like, it seemed like there was holes in that because we've seen rental prices come down month over month over the last year or so. Like we're not cresting back up. So is that changing now? Are those metrics changing where maybe the institutional investors are not investing as much because they're not seeing the increase in values? They're not seeing the rock bottom interest rates. I saw the headline there. I don't have a lot of details, but it just didn't look. It seemed like this seems like old data to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the market is not red hot for that right now. If you could buy and hold right now, even these sort of like quote unquote undesirable units, if you look at like trends in Manhattan and New York, property values, and the availability of property there, they have these tiny little units like that that are lived in, occupied, and they're required. And we may need it again in Toronto. I definitely understand your sentiment about builders building whatever they could and being as greedy as they want.
I don't think it's about being greedy. I think it's just making smart business decisions. Like, we're going to build this building. We're going to max out the profit. That's their job. That they are developers. They are trying to sell and make as much money on that investment as they can. That, to me, there is nothing wrong with that. That's exactly what they should be doing. But we need to put guardrails around that based on what kind of properties we need as a city. And okay, second, if they're not going to be able to sell these 1-bedroom units because nobody's buying them all of a sudden, they will change. They will make that correction and course correct. We don't necessarily have to have government intervention in that if people are not out buying those en masse. But I still think that we should have a certain number that should be part of the building plan, is that you need to have X number of 2-3 bedroom family size units available.
Yeah, see, that's where I think that a little government intervention or municipal intervention is appropriate.
Yeah,
And they
guardrails.
do it. Yeah, they do it. They say, well, you need to have parking. You need to have two levels of parking because we don't have the transit or whatever. We can't put all these people, if they own vehicles, we can't park them on a street. Or they'll say you need to have retail as a part of it. So like you need to build up a community around your units. So we do that already. Could we do it a little bit better? Yes. Will this decline, blip on the radar, decline affect what builders are actually going to build later? Yeah, probably. It's like a wake-up call, but it just may take 15 years to turn around. And certainly in 5 years from now, there's nothing new is going up. Projects are all stalled. So all the units that are available right now won't be available then, I wouldn't predict.
Yeah, I agree. I think eventually they'll all get eaten up, and they'll get, people will eventually buy them. Like, there's no doubt about that. But if you are selling a unit right now, it's likely sitting for longer because people don't want it at that price point. If you want to wait 3 years when all the other units get bought up, then you probably have less competition and you can sell for a higher price. But to be able to sell what it was maybe selling for 2 years ago or 3 years ago seems unlikely right now. And maybe that improves if you've got a really desirable unit and it's in a good place and people want it. But I wouldn't want to be selling a 350 square foot 1-bedroom unit when there's 17 others in the building for sale.
Or if interest rates drop down in the twos again, and then all of a sudden it's not so scary. Because you can carry it.
Is that what people are going to? So does that increase the demand for all units then at that point, where all of a sudden, like, well, I can afford more, I'm going to buy the exact, like, I'm going to overpay for a 350 square foot unit.
Once they start getting gobbled up, I think
I think we're hitting on the same point. I think we're saying, like, investors come back. Is that what you're saying? Like, at some point, investors come back and start buying those up?
It's uncertain because of the policy. Because now, whether we actually are going to reduce our immigration targets, whether we're actually going to, make changes about the immigration factories that the schools are being accused of, whether those changes happen or not.
Happened.
Well, they've reduced the target.
There's far less people coming in. Yeah, but there's less people coming into the
even just
country.
Making a headline out of it is going to have an effect. If you publish a headline about a guilty criminal before he's tried, public perception of that person changes, right? And so that damage has already been done, whether it's short term or long term, or whether we see the immigration targets actually reduced because it was just a proposal to reduce the immigration target. So we'll see, but it makes Canada less attractive for the short term. And a lot of these units, specifically in Vancouver and Toronto, were getting purchased from overseas investors. Their governments have made changes to their foreign purchasing policies as well. So that's pulled it back. But this is what I mean. When government starts to pull on levers, markets respond. And our market has responded negatively. I'm not going to say that the government is the sole contributor to this, but more like a death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, I think that we'll have. I see where you're going there. I think that it's scary to be an investor now. I think that, and I don't think that necessarily changes with lower interest rates, where we'll get more investors rushing back. I think the recent lessons in interest rates interest rates is one thing, but maybe the property values don't go up all the time. People were buying them thinking like, well, I buy it today at 500,000, it's going to be worth $1 million in 5 years. Like, that was the trajectory. It was easy money. And I don't think that people have that in their minds anymore, that if I buy a 1-bedroom unit, I'm going to get maybe as a retirement vehicle or something I'm going to be able to make money from in a couple of years. I don't think people have that in their head anymore, that that's going to make a huge difference on their stock portfolio or their investments, and then parking money into that investment.
And it's a good thing for our market. Our housing market was not on a great on a great path. It was the incline was too sharp. And we saw that, like in the 8 years that I've been doing this, I've put people into condos that they bought for $400K that turned around in 3.5 years, sold for, $600K, so that they could move into their detached property, right? So
Sure.
it helped them out a lot. But you're right, we're not seeing that jump. And I don't know when it's going to be on the horizon that we will see that jump drastically like that, or whether that's even good for our housing market at all.
I think we'll continue to see people trying to keep that first starter condo that they have. Can you keep it and then buy my next property? Can I buy a townhouse or a semi-detached, some more of like a family-sized unit, and then rent that out? I think we'll see that maybe slow sort of build of assets on the ladder. I think that will continue to happen, and it should continue to happen. But you've likely purchased it a decade earlier, or 5 to 10 years earlier. You've paid down the mortgage. The rental prices cover a lot of the cost of it. I think people can still make that decision, and it still be a smart decision. But to go out and like, okay, I bought my house and now I'm going to put $200,000 into this condo that may or may not appreciate in value, I think that's going to be a tougher jump for people to make in the future versus just building up slowly and already seeing, I've already appreciated in value, I will see more value going forward, if you don't need that money from the sale to go towards the down payment of the new property.
I also think one more, I'll touch on one more piece of government policy of our
All right,
last,
hit me. We're on a roll here.
leader that has influenced this sort of condo problem that we have. And that was the proposed increase in capital gains tax. That is a huge deterrent. Whether it was materially huge or only headline huge, it was a deterrent for people to buy investment properties, because when they want to cash out at the end of it, they're like, well, why are we getting spanked here? Why are we putting money into this government's hand? And a lot of people, a lot of investors are conservative type people. And they think, well, we don't want this money going to the Liberal Party either. So it was whether it was a material deterrent or not, it was definitely a headline deterrent. And people responded, and that's sort of all those things have contributed to this over, stock of inventory.
I heard that was one of the big kind of slaps in the face of people who had supported the Liberal government and maybe were a little bit more on the conservative end of things, where that was a big, like, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I don't want to say it's a straw like it was nothing, because I think it was a big 2x4 that broke the camel's back is maybe a little bit better to think about it. Like, it was a big difference maker. Now, that never came to fruition. That never came into policy. They've scrapped that. But the damage is done for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't think this may be an unpopular take, but I think that helps our housing market, that gets more first-time home buyers into properties by making it less attractive for investors to be in it. And there's no pain now to investors. There's no, like, people who have properties and going to sell them, there's no pain for them. It's the exact same policy as it was before.
Right.
But the mindset going forward means that there'll be more selection for first-time home buyers getting into their first properties. And we hear this all the time of, like, what was that article? 56% of prospective buyers believe they've missed their chance to buy. 66% of millennials say their window to enter the market has closed. So the mindset, like, I can't buy, that's prevalent. If we can somehow make properties that are first-time home buyer eligible properties and are eligible kind of for investors, if we can make that less attractive for investors and more attractive for first-time home buyers, millennials, and the generations that follow, I think that's a positive.
Yeah, well, and their perspective is wrong. Like, materially, it's wrong that they can't get into a property like these condos. Like, we may see stuff selling in the high threes in the next couple of years, or low to mid fours. in order to get some of this stuff moving. And if that goes into the hands of Canadians, well, that helps solve our housing problem. So I'm not anti-investors. I think, I've definitely been on the record, and I definitely feel like foreign investors are not a problem. If they provide the capital that gets these units built, and then eventually when they exit the market, Canadians are buying that inventory up, I think everybody wins.
I don't see the benefit, to be honest. I don't see the benefit in having them foreign buyers. Like the position that we're in right now, where at least the mentality is that Canadians can't buy. The last thing they need is the perceived competition of other people in the market buying up those properties. That was a big thing in 2017 when the housing market was taking off. It's like, oh, all these foreign buyers are buying up our houses. It was debunked in a lot of ways that wasn't actually happening, but it was the mentality that was happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of what we're touching on in this episode. Is like, if the government makes an announcement, whether it's executed or not, it has a profound effect on the market.
Yeah.
And now we're sort of like, maybe we're at the bottom of the trough, and hopefully that wave's going to crest again. But we're looking to see some movement here, because all these empty units, this is no good at all.
No, this is the first time. And just to put some more, so I know we were saying like, oh, millennials actually are in a better position to buy than they were last year, or like that window hasn't closed. But the reality is that Canadians who are 30 years of age for the first time in history are worse off than what their parents were at the same age, and are not able to just go buy kind of their family home of what their parents would have been able to do at that time.
Yeah, it's different. And I agree with that. I think it's taking longer to get going. But, they say 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new 60. Somebody hit the fast forward button for 10 years. I think we'll be okay.
There are options out there. I work with plenty of people in their 20s that are able to buy, and they're buying properties and they're making decisions that are right for them, but they're not able to necessarily buy a semi-detached or detached home in Toronto like you were 20 years ago. So
my advice to young people is this: think about the trades, but primarily, even more important than that, be a good person. Because you're probably going to need a partner of some kind to help you afford that property. Be a good person, be likable, be useful. Keep that in mind.
That's your first time home buyer advice.
That's it.
Get married.
Be a good person. Be likable. Be responsible. It'll work out.
That's right.
Well, I wanted to talk about the stress test, but I think that we're at like the 40-minute mark here.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think we're all good. That we've covered a lot of ground here, but there is maybe next week we can also talk about there's a CMHC report that came out. I want to read into it further before we jump into it, but there's one stat that I'll tease you with for next week is that 65% of first-time home buyers max out their purchase price. That's according to the CMHC. So let's dive into that next week.
Okay. Sean, it's been great.
See you next time.